so much. Can we give it up for the Zebu Live team? They're doing an incredible job. They've been building this for a number of years here in London, and anyone who is running a conference in London deserve our immense respect because it's not an easy job. And thank you all for coming. My name is Otto Jacobssen, and I help run Yap Global, the leading PR consultancy in the space. So we work with the leading DeFi, digital assets, and crypto projects in the space. But enough about me. We're here to talk about scaling without compromise. And do you guys want to introduce yourself and maybe what you do in the space?
Yeah, for sure. I can kick things off. I'm Sam Golden, Director of Brand and Communications at RoostockLabs. We contribute to Rootstock, which is a DeFi layer of Bitcoin that's been around since 2018. It has about $250 million of total value locked in the network, and is primarily used by people across the world and institutions to get loans against their Bitcoin to be able to expand into new markets, as well as interact with all the different DeFi protocols you typically see in an Ethereum environment, now built on top of Bitcoin and secured by Bitcoin.
Great.
Hey, and welcome everybody first. I'm Lucian Mincu. I'm one of the technical founders of Elrond, or previously known as Elrond, now MultiversX. We're perhaps one of the few unicorns out of Europe, actually exceeded Decacorn at some time. But nevertheless, actually, we've been focusing on sharding, which is, in short, parallelized blockchain execution, and bringing and scaling and delivering it to the mass adoption, which I think we did pretty decent here out of Europe. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Hello, London. It's nice to be home for once at a panel and a conference. We travel the world. Nice to be in London. I'm Fahmi, Syed. I'm president of the Midnight Foundation. We're bringing programmable privacy and identity to blockchains, and how that brings the new institutional adoption and more wider adoption from corporates, builders, and Web3 sort of industry as a whole.
Yeah, hey guys, thank you for hanging around. I know happy hour is at 6. My name's Declan. I'm the VP of Growth for Aurora Labs. We are very much focused around removing complexity from blockchains. So we've built a virtual chain solution, and most recently, I'm at the first multi-chain launchpad and multi-chain DEX, where we've actually just done $1 billion in volume over the last 30 days.
Great. Thanks so much. Want to start by throwing this out there for whoever wants to pick it up. But what are the compromises that you're having to make in terms of reaching scalability in today's multi-chain world? What is it that you're really working hard at solving? Anyone want to pick up on that? Yeah, Declan?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is probably to get consensus on what we actually mean by scalability, because I actually don't think scalability means transaction throughput anymore, right? I mean, just using Near as an example, we now have 1.2 second finality, 600 millisecond time. I actually think scalability is about user experience. It's how do we now abstract away all of the complexities. Most of the networks, including the networks on this panel, have been built in silo, right? They haven't been built alongside all of the other networks. And the downside for users is it means if they want to interact with these networks, they need to make many different changes. They need to swap wallets. They need to bridge assets. And that just isn't sustainable or scalable. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested to hear what other people's opinions are regarding scalability now.
I completely agree with that. We need to abstract away all the complexity. The user shouldn't be thinking about swapping from USDT from Polygon to Solana or whatever. It should be a seamless experience. It should be the same asset. But with that comes helping people understand the trade-off and trust assumptions of the asset as it exists on the different networks. And when we think about security, that comes from like the blockchain level, the protocol level, and the asset level as well. So there's either a responsibility on us in the industry in helping people understand that, or it's about agreeing on a kind of unified set of standards that every blockchain in the industry kind of helps enforce. Because otherwise we have people thinking they're holding USDT or Bitcoin when in fact they're holding an IOU for that asset instead of the actual asset itself.
Just to jump in there, are you saying that we should be thinking more about the asset itself, the token that we're using, rather than the chain that's underlying?
I think that all three, the asset, the protocol, and then the blockchain or network level as well, all need to be considered when we're thinking about that. But the asset, when it moves between networks, doesn't always keep the exact same properties.
Right.
Bitcoin is a great example. Is Bitcoin on Base the same as Bitcoin on the Bitcoin layer 1? No. You're using Coinbase Bitcoin, which is controlled by a single custodian. That isn't the same as Bitcoin with its decentralization. So
Yeah. Sorry, Lucian.
Yeah. Maybe to build on top of that, one particular thing that, if I look at the industry, will be forced to evolve, especially with regulated assets that need to be fully fungible. Like $1 should be and should end at the end of the destination still $1. That will force, for the first time, I think, the entire complexity or the entire compatibility and integration stack to be changed and forced to be optimized for users. And when I look at that, for example, just to put a bit in perspective, we've took some crazy bets, especially out of Europe, just to restate. When we started like 8 years ago and worked on sharding, like people would say, well, what the hell are you talking about? And they are still looking very weird at me and at us, most likely, when we're talking about very technical stuff. But on the other hand, like solving that part and then placing bets on user experience, where we have managed to ship wallets or user interfaces that connects more than 2 million users, as we speak, where you have seamless way to spend your crypto, to earn crypto with credit cards, with security primitives similar to the bank inside your pocket. That's, I think, something that we will see in the next, I think, months to come into the mainstream adoption. I think stablecoins are a superior form of money, and then beyond that, especially backed and actually collateralized by Bitcoin, by any kind of digital asset, will be the main thing that you will be hearing for the decade to come, I think, especially the US president launching his own stablecoin. That should send a
We're all
strong...
going to have a stablecoin one day.
Definitely. I think almost every big corporation will almost go that way. But what I'm trying to say here is actually, it's on the one hand the technicalities, but then also we will be forced by the regulation, by some specific rules where we will see mainstream adoption coming out from to force towards that.
Great. Fahmi, I want to bring you into the conversation here because
Yes.
not as the privacy guy, but is there anything that worries you about how we're building today? And is privacy a back thought?
So I'll come back to privacy. I think I just want to address some of the points that the panel
Sure.
raised. So I do agree it's about user experience. But the reality is, people ask me about Midnight, where we want to be. We should be invisible. We talk too much about the blockchain.
Yeah.
And the conversation here is very much about scalability around assets and trading. Yeah, if you all take out your phone, the application you use the most is probably not a trading app. So infrastructure is about, decentralization was about bringing a new way to do business for people to connect, for ownership to work in different ways. So we've got to think about data as opposed to assets. And the first thing we have to tackle before privacy, and privacy is important, and I'm sure I'll talk about it later on, is about the tokenomics within blockchain. They're broken. In the world today, when you use your phone, you consume technology. Even the phone, you don't typically own it. You normally rent it. You lease it through your telecoms company. Ownership is about consuming resources, whether it's AI for answering questions, Google for finding information. You consume cloud services. You don't own servers. The tokenomics that we see today across most blockchain is one of ownership, which is the biggest hindrance to interoperability and scalability. I need to, as a developer, think about owning an asset which gives me access to a network. I then cannibalize the very asset I wanted to go up in value to pay for my transactions. So if I'm in Solana and I'm very Solana focused, how do I go and interact with Ether or with Bitcoin? I have to go and own the other asset. That's not my core focus. That's not my core expertise. And the very asset that you want to own and go up in value is the very asset you cannibalize to pay for things. So what happens when transactions, the capital goes up and you're worth $1 million a token? Your transactions grind to a halt. You can't predict capacity. You can't predict the cost. So how do large corporations who think about scalability come into blockchain? So at the Midnight Network, we've actually split the ownership and the gas token fee, for want of a better word. If you own the ownership, it will emit and give you access to the network. That gives you programmable privacy. So suddenly you can make a decision to guarantee capacity by owning something and access it that way, or you can lease the capacity. So then technologies, when they're built stacks, can consume Midnight's technology and privacy-enabling solutions. So I think we have to address some of the bits that are broken in our network. That encourages interoperability. A Solana DEX can come and use Midnight's, consumes Midnight privacy, Arbitrum, Ether, Bitcoin. So we've got to move away from tribalism and move to a more cooperative tokenomic model. And that helps scalability and really helps the infrastructure layers within blockchain really develop and really grow.
I can just build on top of that and then say that after, again, 7 years, very expensive experiences actually building out, we came to the same conclusion, and we thought that I think the bottleneck of the networks is not only throughput, it's important to have sub-second finality, it's important to be damn fast, to put it like this. But the most critical problem is we would love to have that kind of demand, and the user should not think about whatever assets or whatever they need to pay first. You don't enter a shop and then say, look, let me just, before I buy this or whatever. In most of technologies, you can lease that out. You have a way to offload the costs down the road while the user is using the application, not prepaid. And this is, I think, the fundamental shift that we're doing. I think Mid-90 is doing, and very, very excited. I think this is one of the few points that makes me bullish that I could go on the street and say, just place the phone and say, try it out, and then there's no cost for that. That's I think what changed fundamentally.
Yeah, great. Declan, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise a really good point. But I also think there's the other end of the spectrum here, right? So we still have a scenario where people can accidentally send an asset to the wrong wallet, and poof, it's gone. I think that there's definitely a review that needs to be done of the overall relationship with tokenomics and the overall structure of assets. But I also think projects need to take real accountability for their own user experience. I mean, if you logged onto your Monzo or Revolut app and you sent assets to an account number that was 1 digit off, Monzo wouldn't turn around and say, "Yeah, sucks to be you." You'd get it back. It might take 2 days, but you'd get it back. So I think making sure that you've got that super fluid user experience is critical. And one of the things that we've been doing, with Near Intents, is you don't even need a wallet. You can just use your iOS passkey with your face. That's it. More importantly than that, we don't care where your asset's from. So whether you've got, I'll use Aurora as an example, on Near, Ethereum, or native Aurora, you won't see it. If it's XRP on Near, XRP on Near, you won't see it either. All you see is the token. And that's a really important thing because it removes so much of the difficulty and so many of the pain points that exist for users. And I think it's actually on us as builders and as project owners to take full accountability for that, and to ensure it's seamless because we talk about confidence in crypto and we talk about mass adoption, but you can't have it if you don't have the right fundamentals. So I think that's an important point to add. So
you mentioned a couple of chains there near Ethereum and so on. Is that EVM only, or is outside EVM?
No. So Near Intents has been deliberately designed to be multi-chain across the board. So we support all of the major networks. We've got obviously Solana, Ethereum, Near. Aurora is not as major as those, obviously, but we've got Arbitrum, Avalanche, Tron, you name it, we've got it.
Bitcoin?
We've got Bitcoin. In fact, I was demonstrating to someone earlier that it took 3 seconds to literally swap the Bitcoin into XRP, just because. And there's no fee for that either. There's no ridiculous costs of a $5 cost to trade $1, right?
Right.
So we're adding networks all the time, but it's not just the big networks, it's also the smaller projects. So, if projects have their own virtual chain, their token is listed there. And that's another important thing because many projects now, especially in this market, especially after last week, really do need access to liquidity and they really do need access to distribution. And they can't get that without paying millions of dollars in marketing fees, to major centralized exchanges. Well, why? There's no reason for it. Technologically speaking, there's no reason at all. It's just greed. So I think making that open, that's a whole different conversation. So we won't go down that rabbit hole.
The reason why I asked about Bitcoin, I want to bring you, Sam, into the conversation. I think there's this perception that it's really hard to work with I guess if you're coming from an EVM perspective, really hard to work with the Bitcoin standards and so on. How are you seeing that develop? And
100%.
Is it as hard as people think?
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this before we went on stage. Bitcoin at the L1 has limited expressibility and programmability compared to other EVM chains. So how do you create a way of enabling people to use Bitcoin, the asset, away from Bitcoin, the network,
right,
in a safe and secure way. And back to my point earlier, knowing you'll be able to redeem that for Bitcoin at the end of the day. And I think this utopian vision of a world where you don't care what chain you're on could be amazing, but it relies on everyone within the industry uniting over making sure those assets can be redeemed at the end of the day. Because otherwise there's risk people think they're holding Bitcoin and they won't be able to swap it back to that base asset at the end of the day. I think the midnight model is really interesting as well with the kind of two tokens. I might butcher this, Fahmi, but one of them depreciating in value or burning over time. Is that correct?
Right. So the way we thought about it was because if you own an equity, let's say Microsoft, if you own the equity, you get dividend. You want more dividend, you buy more equity. You hold a bigger position. So with Knight, we thought about how do you keep utility and the gas fee available to people. So there's an ownership token, which would be like any other listed equity crypto asset. It'd be volatile. But that volatility is not what people, users want. So that will give you a perpetual emission of dust, the privacy-enabling computational power. So that gives you access. Think of it like you own a power station, which gives you perpetual electricity. And then if you want more electricity for more transactions, buy more substations. But equally, like electricity, you can access electricity without owning it. You can lease it. You get it from your utilities company. So in the same way, there'll be large custodians, large holders who will have excess amount of capacity that they can lease to people. And what you get is privacy-enabling computation. That decays to zero. So you can't have a store of value. So avoid some of the compliance issues around privacy tokens. We don't see it as a privacy token. We just see it as a computational power where your journey starts fully shielded, and then through the smart contract technology, you open that up. And the reality is, we've got accustomed to blockchains where all your data is public. When we talk about scalability, let's look beyond the people in this room. I admire the people in this room, but the real liquidity, the real infrastructure sits outside of this room in the real world. And they will not bring their assets, their trading, their telecoms, their medical care, healthcare records, research onto a public blockchain, only for them to get docs. So that solution was one around how you access capacity, but also how you bring compliance around privacy technology into this space. So there's two elements to why we designed it this way.
But then I guess you're removing the risk of what happened with AWS yesterday, where no one can use any of those centralized services because AWS went down.
Yeah, so again, you could get to a place where you have privacy storage and other elements, so you could bring that. So nobody needs to know what server you use or what technology you use, but it becomes decentralized. Again, let's go back to what Bitcoin and Ethereum and others, what values they held. And the values are around decentralization. And more we become centralized in blockchain. More and more we talk about assets and trading as opposed to what the real infrastructure is meant to be doing.
I maybe just jump in and have a slightly, even though I agree with the privacy prevention, I very much agree also maybe to jump and one step back. I don't think that intent solves, generally speaking, the accountability of sending coins to a wrong wallet in any way, but that's another point. But and also just to build on the privacy preserving, I do believe that it's very critical for certain institutional investors or certain institutions that wants to actually operate on public blockchain. However, if I look at the macroeconomics and what's happening nowadays, actually the government, the US government found a way, just to put a simple playbook, they found a way to tokenize the American debt, which is the national problem of the US dollar compared to any other government. And then on the other hand, they are literally putting all the incentives and the policy to use particularly open blockchain. Why open blockchain? Because they could distribute the American dollar to the end of the earth, no matter what, and they would want to do that in the shortest time frame while the other governments are literally trying to find a way out to distribute their debt, right, to the others, to the other
But people
countries.
love it, right?
100%, and I think literally in third world countries, people are literally benefiting compared to having their maybe pesos was the news the last days where just to put a bit on that, I do believe that there's space for both of them. Again, time will tell exactly how they will play out. Indeed, a big institution will want to have the privacy preserving, and I don't doubt that in any way. However, I think because of the speed of execution and the intention and the need for some certain real world problem to be solved as debt of the US dollar to be distributed, I think they will use any mean of doing that.
I completely agree.
Just to...
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But again, if we take that, the Genius Act, if you look at the Genius Act and how that opens up stablecoins, and I spent 20 years in the financial world, dealt with regulations for the financial crisis, AIFMD, Dodd-Frank, and other things, the Genius Act favors the institutions.
100%.
It talks about KYB, KYC. Ultimately, in the blockchain space, we don't have that. So with Midnight, the way we think about it is we'd love to work with Intents and what Near are doing. We'd love to work with all the panels here, because essentially we can give you solutions that don't exist on your network, and you can consume that. Again, when you build technology stacks in traditional worlds, whether it's finance or telecoms, healthcare, you don't build a singular stack. You build stacks. You use Snowflake for database. You use AWS for cloud. Maybe the wrong name to use after yesterday's issues, but you use different providers for different things, and you use those to build your stack and build your solution. I see a future, and I hope everybody else will come to this place where we don't have tribalist views where one chain does everything and everything alone, that they can actually use these. So I see a future where Near Intents could use privacy from Midnight to also create a version which is KYB'd, KYC'd, and ring-fenced, and they can have both versions. So it's not one or the other. What privacy gives you, and we all start our worlds private. We never leave our front door naked. We leave it closed. If you get hot, I take my cardigan off. Technology is the same. In blockchain, if you start public, it's very hard to add privacy afterwards. You can't cloak yourself after you've been decloaked. So we think about how our solutions help others, and the tokenomics also encourages others. So we're very open-minded to work with.
I just need to correct again. I think you can add, and the evolution of any kind of technology is that they have evolved. It's very hard, though, to change a running engine. I must agree on that. But I think we have many examples where you can add ZK primitives, and most of the chains have not. Especially the old ones that have stayed out there were not born with all the primitives that we are serving today. But agree in the principle on that as well.
Just switching gears a little bit in terms of thinking about the topic for our panel, scaling without compromise, and then infrastructure. So thinking a little bit about user experience, and we talk a lot about users being me as a private individual using. But what about projects? What about protocols building with your solutions or building in general in the space? Declan, what are some of the key pain points in terms of a user experience that you see for projects building with Near Intents or whatever it may be? Yeah,
I mean, I think that there's a couple of areas which any business, Web 2, Web 3 struggles with, but especially in our industry, one is the expertise that's required, right? Because we have all of these siloed networks, they need engineers that can develop in multiple different languages, some of them extremely expensive, raw solidity, and it also means that they need to keep up with multiple networks, all at the same time facing attacks from countries and nation states with no cybersecurity budgets to do this. So the biggest challenge for projects is being able to have secure infrastructure that can match their speed, that can provide a good user experience. And obviously I've talked about Near Intents already, so I won't go into that again. But on the virtual chain side, for example, we've got 270 that are now live, give or take. And anybody can do it. It takes 30 seconds, you put it, you say what you want, and it's just created. And that gives you your oracles, it connects you to the centralized exchanges. It takes care of all of those complex pieces that would otherwise have cost 50 to 100 grand. It gives you all of Near's 220 plus validators. Right. So I think it's about ensuring that projects and not the dominant forces, but the players in the market remains decentralized as well. What we don't want is what we're seeing in AI right now, where you've got one or two, maybe three companies that are absolutely eating the market alive, right? Within this space, we've got hundreds of projects, so we need to make sure that they can get infrastructure easily, get it cheaply, or free, even better. But most importantly, they shouldn't have to sacrifice who they can target by choosing their network. They shouldn't come to Aurora, for example, or Near, and then be stuck only operating within that ecosystem. And that's why you do need to have these supporting pillars. So, we've got the virtual chains for your infrastructure. We've got intents to connect to multiple networks, and to ensure that your users have a good experience. If they've got a token they want to launch, we've got the multi-chain launch pad that can access to Solana, Arbiter, and Avalanche. It's about choice, it's about a lack of barriers and silos, and it's about removing all of that just unnecessary complexity.
Great. Thank you. Sam, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that fragmentation of liquidity is one of the biggest challenges. If I'm developing an app, I need to build where there's going to be users already.
Yep.
But I don't want to limit myself by deploying on one chain and not being able to access the rest of the market. And I think that's a really important thing that needs to change. I think it's why either we need to abstract the complexity so the end user doesn't even need to think about which chain they're using, and that means the builder has to figure out how to abstract the complexity. Or we need to find a way where we can empower builders, as Declan was saying, to actually be able to integrate cross-chain standards. So I think Layer 0 do a really good job about this with bridging. They enable assets to be bridged between different networks in a seamless and decentralized way. And that allows people then to build on any network, knowing that they can bring in assets very easily from other networks and then harness whatever the base benefits of that blockchain would be, whether it's Bitcoin hash rate or another benefit from another network. But I think that's really important, is like, how do we enable builders to be able to tap into the global liquidity, avoid fragmentation, and also deploy quickly, because that's another really difficult thing, which I think is why Solidity has gained such traction, because you've got multiple chains you can deploy across, and integrating those chains is way easier than integrating other blockchains that use their own programming languages.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go back again to 2 steps to the part of the usability of the technology and the part where we all want to have and achieve. And I'll go to a very simple use case and build on top of what you mentioned with Layer 0. I think one of the points where I think would be a bull case for example, the stable coins, in order to simplify the entire path, would be indeed with infrastructure similar to maybe Layer 0 or XLR, which you can have actually $1 to be burned and moved to any other chain without actually thinking that it will become or end up less than $1. And that this as well for Euro. And for that, for example, I'm just building and going again to what are the bull cases that I'm focusing and seeing here in Europe. For example, one of again our bets actually as an ecosystem is one of the stablecoin, like one of the few issuers, stablecoin issuers out of Europe, where we partner with Sui ecosystem and some other relevant players, where we do look particularly at those challenges. How do we make sure that we put this technology using the blockchain rails as an invisible shield or as an invisible layer to as many people possible? And we have right now already cards. We're working with central banks. We're working with pretty much most of the banks across Europe as of today to make sure and find the easiest way to attach. And this won't be on MultiversX only. This will be a game for us to unite it all. Because on the other hand, if we're not managing to do this, I'm stating this and making it obvious, today there's Stripe actually coming against where they have the distribution actually for merchants for Web2. And if we as Web3 industry cannot unite ourselves and manage to beat them at their own game, this will be an end game very soon for the industry, and we will be all of us actually paying tens of millions to integrate with those guys. Just putting a bit here, and this is, I think, we should, on the one hand, I'm a technical founder, and I feel the pain when I'm talking about the technical challenges and friction of this. But on the other hand, I also see that if we don't move fast enough and unite this industry together as a force, I think the opportunity to win the world close, and especially out of Europe, even more so.
So, I mean, we're talking about interoperability standards, which gets everyone excited, for sure. You can see it in the audience, right? It's just incredible excitement around a topic like that. But Fahmi, what is the sort of status of interop standards at the moment? And are people coming together like we all want them to, and ecosystems are building together, or not really?
Yeah, look, I think what we're seeing is every chain it builds, it talks about being faster, better in some way, differentiating. But what we see often, if we go back to the asset discussion, liquidity just goes from the current chain to the next chain. Somebody gives you some yield incentive, and you follow that yield incentive. But actually, new liquidity is not coming in. Real advancements aren't coming in. Adoption comes in 2 forms. One, the developer experience. I completely agree in terms of how builders use. So at Midnight, we've used a new language called Compact, which looks and feels a lot like TypeScript. And we've handed that over to the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. So we think we want to get it out to a bigger audience and help with those sort of partners grow that. But at the same time, there's a user experience. Declan mentioned about how you make it easy. Who wants to remember a 20-word passphrase to access their wallet and then make sure they pay it to the right. Like nobody cares. And the best thing we could be is blockchains. And I think the people ask me, what does Midnight want to be, the network in 3-5 years, which is a long time in crypto. I want to be invisible. To your point, people should not even know that they're using the Midnight network. I go back to the old days when you used to see those laptop adverts, and you used to get the Intel chime, and that everything was powered by Intel. Now, obviously, there's AMD and there's NVIDIA and other things, but every laptop almost had an Intel advert. I want Midnight to be powering, whether it's your smartphone or your watch, and there's healthcare data, and some of that proof sits on Midnight, whether it's providing proofs around an enclosed, regulated version of near intents, where IDs can sit there, where there's healthcare data. Digital ID in the UK is something that the government speaks about. So I think they're the things that help scalability. But going back to the interoperability question, you're seeing certain people lead the way. You've seen in the US that the US federated data from the central government through to multiple chains, but they had to be connected to one of two interoperable providers, Chainlink and Pith. If you weren't there, your chain was not getting data from the US government. So there'll be certain winners. The winners will be the ones who build rails that connect networks, not just the siloed network. So again, you watch around that, around stablecoin issuances. How do you put those easily out to multiple chains through a single build, as opposed to having to build lots of differentiate builds because of the uniqueness of each chain, the languages in each chain. So I think they'll be used, and then the tokenomics has an impact on that. How do you access it? How do you pay for it?
Yeah. Any thoughts?
You asked, are people uniting around this? And I think, unfortunately, there's an economic incentive often for people not to unite. Like, everyone wants to be a stablecoin issuer. Everyone wants to launch their own version of wrapped Bitcoin because they believe either they can get a revenue stream from it or they can have some element of control over that asset. And that's a challenge until we kind of remove that or we unite, like, the kind of like good actors in the ecosystem around a number of different token standards. We're going to keep seeing new stablecoins being issued and new different wrap versions of Bitcoins that have all of these different risk trade-offs around them. And I think we're just going to see more fragmentation. So that's like what I'm worried about. I don't know what the solution to it is, but yeah.
It might be a bit controversial, but I don't think we need everyone to unite. I think we just remove the choice. To put it bluntly, right? I touched upon Calyx earlier. We've built this launchpad on our own, but we've built it on top of near intents, and we did the first sale literally 10 days ago, and 11 different networks and chains participated. We didn't speak to any of those networks. We didn't speak to any of those chains.
But you made it easy for us.
We just made it easy.
Yeah.
We don't care what wallet you use. So, I think there's a fine balance between uniting and just removing the barriers yourself. You are always going to get networks that aren't going to budge, especially the biggest ones. Because, if I was to go into anyone in the audience and say, give me £1,000, no one's going to do it, right? I mean, if you are, raise your hand.
You're a nice guy, Declan.
Well, I'm nice, but probably not £1,000 nice. But you're not going to do it. And it's the same for companies. They've got investors, a lot of them. And, they're not going to be happy if all of a sudden this liquidity is disappearing. So I think as builders, you just need to build products that bypass that entirely. And then that's exactly what we're trying to do. But at the same time, we're trying to partner with all of these networks and with everybody we can, because it's going to be much more effective. It's all well and good, not to contradict myself, it's all well and good doing it without them. But if you can demonstrate just how much better it is for their users and how much better it is for their builders, whilst also demonstrating that it's not going to drain their networks of liquidity, which is the biggest fear. When we break it down to its core point, that is it. It's losing users and it's losing liquidity. But actually, I don't think that's the case. I think it just pushes everybody to be the best that they can be, to provide the best experience, and the rails will be just what facilitates it, and that's it.
Yeah. Coming towards the end of our chat, it's been fantastic. I just want to do some sort of rapid fire in terms of projections, what do you think about 2026 in terms of this topic, or anything else that you want to share, really? Sam, starting with you, what are you most excited about in 2026?
I think it comes back a little bit. I agree with what Declan's saying about, and sometimes it's about removing the barriers, but I also think some unification around, I think USDT and USDT Zero are doing a great job of kind of democratizing access to stablecoins and standardizing across networks. I'd love to see more adoption of those kind of standards and more usage of those kind of protocols. I think we're getting close to that. You talked about kind of US dollar dominance. It would also be interesting to see how that happens in terms of other denominated stablecoins that aren't US dollars emerging into the market. We've not seen it in a big way yet, but the next few years could be
What happen?
I think the bill just passed. Just give it a few weeks. We'll definitely have the surprises. I think the president is doing a good job advertising the business very well, and just announced that their family collected the first $1 billion from the industry. But nevertheless, I just moved back, and I think one fascinating point that I said, I'm not allowed to say this. Usually, you would pay as a chain to integrate with a stablecoin upwards of minimum 10 to 50, maybe 100 million. Trump is charging 100 million, I think, for an integration with USD1. Nevertheless, so on the one hand, I appreciate and look very much and respect with Tether, and we're working also together on several stuff. But then, on the other hand, while they did a phenomenal job on the USDT Zero, where you just need to integrate as a layer 1 or as an infrastructure with the bridge, now the entry barriers has moved to the bridge side, where the bridge charges you the 10 million. just moving again. On the other hand, I do agree that they did a very good job, and I think this is the only power that unites the ecosystem, or have done and managed to do that. On what it comes to us, to MultiversX, I think we are extremely bullish finally to reshape everything that we have built and finally package and connect it to the American capital markets. Right. I think this is one of the points that have dominated this industry. Unfortunately, even though, again, as a technical founder, the pain is 10 times harder to state this, but I think the market has been dominated by especially capital markets, financial products from within the US industry. And that's, I think, where we're going to see the most of the liquidity coming on chain. And then, of course, with the right tools, with the right bridges connected, with the right incentives, with the right builders, this united, I think, that the next year would be a very bullish year for 2026.
Right. Fahmi?
I'll take that in two parts. So Midnight has just finished the Glacier Drop, which is our fair distribution mechanism. We enabled 8 ecosystems to come and claim 100% of our supply. It's the first time we're giving it away. We think our technology is good enough that we want everybody to come and build on it. So if you get the Night token, you get access through
How can we get
capacity. It closed, unfortunately, on Monday.
Damn.
We should have spoken last week.
Yeah.
But that's been a huge success. I think it will be, by the time it concludes, there's now a second phase scavenger mine where others can come and take part. Amazing. So for us, the exciting thing is getting to launch, which will happen at the end of this year. And then we have over 60, 70 partners already building use cases, everything from medical, records, proofs coming in for research mechanisms. So excited to see Midnight launch, and we can talk hopefully next time about what people are building.
Yeah.
For 2026, just in general, I like to get to a place where we're not just talking about trading crypto and actually showing real infrastructure bills, real technology bills, where people don't even talk about the chain, they talk about the product. If we're talking about the product and what people are using, it's a bit like the scenario yesterday with AWS. Nobody talks about AWS until all your products stop working because AWS went down. I'd like blockchain to get to a place like that where we're not talking about just trading assets and stablecoins.
Or about the AWS bills.
Yes.
Declan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely ignoring the impact that AI is probably going to have on everything we've just spoken about, sure. Over the next year. I think what we're going to see is a lot more simplicity in how we build. And, the big thing really this year has all been about how we can have interoperability with apps, not capital. And I think what we're going to see next year is that shift, where actually it's going to be much more about distributed capital and not, when we're already kind of starting to see it, right? We're seeing big Web 2 institutions entering this space, which is also why our market's now so much more affected by things like tariffs, things like global crises, because obviously so much of the money and the liquidity coming in is coming from Web 2. That's going to grow without a doubt. And making the technology more simple is just going to rapidly accelerate that. So yeah, for me, I think what we're going to see next year, is a much wider distribution from a capital perspective, because users are not going to be bound. And I think that's going to be great, because ultimately that gets us all where we want to be, which is a place where we're no longer competing with each other for 2% of the market. We're actually sharing 97% of the market. And, you know, if we can get to that place, well, then it's no longer Web 2 or Web 3. It's just a new form of technology and payment rails. And that's the ultimate goal for all of us here, I think.
And on that sentiment, we have to wrap up. Thank you very much for coming and listening, and thank you to our panelists. Let's give them a round
Thank you.
of applause.